Well, it certainly has been a minute since we've last had an update to Lucent, and for me it's been even longer because I actually filmed that previous episode a year and a half ago. So this has been a really long time coming, and I'm very glad I've managed to get these machined at last. So these are the fan mounts that go in this top panel. Hello. So previously, the mounts that I had in here were 3D printed, and that was okay for the show and just getting things out of the way, but really it needs to be a proper aluminium part. So what I've done is I've used the same grade of aluminium so I can get this all anodized together, and I think at the moment I'm erring towards just going with a plain black anodizing on this. It seems to look the best. The media blasted ones come out a little bit too powdery, so I think if I just leave it as is, the shiny finish that's already on the aluminium will come through a little bit in the black one, and it should look really good. It also means that there'll be fewer internal reflections inside the chassis, and I can make better use of other colors and things. So I think that's the route I'm going to take with all of this. So the way that these work is on the inside of here, there's going to be a little 3D printed insert. Now the reason for that is on the other side of the fans, they've got the hub, and these sections have a lot of exposed electronics. So if I wanted to make them out of aluminium, there's a lot of risk of shorting things if I don't quite get it right, or maybe one bit of solder extends a bit further. Whereas if I 3D print them, there's no worry about that, and then I can just use an adhesive and put these into the mounts. What I've done is I've changed the design quite a bit. I didn't really like the curves on the printed ones. They didn't really fit in with anything else on the build, so I got rid of those, made them straight, and I think actually the design looks a lot cleaner. I've put a sort of spiral toolpath using a 6mm ball end mill on the top of these parts. It takes a lot longer to put down, but it does look fantastic when anodized. I've used it on a few of the pump heat sinks before, so I kind of know what to expect, and I think it should fit in really nicely with the other raw aspects of this plate. These fit in like so. And obviously I've got another one over there, and then you have the fans underneath, and it should look lovely and flush from this side. Now with these parts out of the way, we also need to move on to a bunch of other things that I wasn't happy with previously. Namely, this panel has a lot wrong with it. I mean, it's okay, I got it functioning in the end, but the original model was missing a load of different features, and some things just weren't right. This hole, for instance, was just too small. I couldn't fit any of the connectors through it properly, so I had to de-pin all the wires. That's really impractical. I want to be able to just put things through quickly without fuss. So that's going to have to become bigger. And also, I just don't like this vent. It doesn't really do anything. In the original idea, I was going to have the glass panels and other things on the chassis, but I think after seeing it in person actually operating, it's just going to look a lot better without the panels, and if I don't have the panels, well, I don't need a vent. So I'm going to make a new one of these panels. It's going to have all the changes plus a few other things. Now to do that, I've got some cool new tools, and one of them that I'm going to be trying out on this panel is this bad boy. So this is their new version of the HSK25 monoblock tool that I've been using, and if you've been watching any of the ASMR videos, you may have noticed that I'm not using one of these, and that's because a year ago, almost exactly, I had a pretty nasty spindle crash with a piece of brass that came off the vacuum bed. It completely stalled it, and I had to get my spindle replaced, and my version of this tool was stuck because it completely friction welded into the spindle. The interesting thing about the two is that the original was made by Big Daishawa, and this one is not. So I'm excited to see if it's going to perform the same or better. It uses the same inserts, so realistically it should be pretty similar, but we're going to put that to the test, I guess. In the meantime, let's go through what needs to be done on this panel. So come in. As usual, I've done this whole thing in Fusion 360. We're going to be starting with a 6.35mm 1/4 inch aluminium panel. I'm using 6082 T6511 aluminium for this. So we're going to start with just a facing operation. This is just going to get it down to thickness. And then we're going to get all these various bores done. We've got some M6 threads which are going to go through the panel here, which is secured to the bottom of the motherboard tray. What we're going to do a little bit differently to normal is we're going to leave these with an adaptive floor finish. I wouldn't normally do that, but it does look pretty good when anodized, so I thought I may as well make a little bit of a feature out of it. And then what we're going to do is over to Op 20, we're going to flip it over. We're going to measure off the top bottom right corner, and then we've just got a large pocket that we need to get rid of. So we're going to do the whole facing thing again. We're going to come in, do our various threads, counterbores, all this similar stuff. We've got the big pocket. Once again, I'm going to be leaving an adaptive floor finish on this one. Got these final corner pockets, which again are going to be left with an adaptive finish. And then with all these final drills, we should be good to go. So let's pop to the Datron and get it going. Well, I'm really happy with how this has come out. I think it's a huge improvement over the original one. On this side, obviously, I've got the big pocket, and this just gives me a bit of clearance at the bottom of the chassis, and I've left the adaptive
Tennessee floor finish
on the bottom of this one. I think it looks really nice. Obviously it's not quite as smooth as if I'd done a proper finishing pass, but this doesn't really have any tolerances attached to it, so it's just a clearance pocket. And for that reason, I think it was a better priority just to make it so that it looks nice once it's been anodized. Now the last thing we need to do in this episode is sort out a few clearance problems with the motherboard tray. So there are a few things in here that when I did the test fit, I wasn't that pleased with. So as you can see, I've put a bunch of different notes on here. First up, I want to have a channel which comes over from sort of down here and goes around, and that should give me some clearance for a ribbon cable that goes here. The other thing that I want to do is widen this area. These holes were too small for the connectors, and on top of that, I couldn't really put any kind of support on here for the cables to stop them from falling out. So this made it really impractical, so I completely avoided it. The way that I had to avoid it is I had to link everything up, because this is for the RGB cables for the reservoirs. I had to link them up in a separate part of the chassis, which meant that I couldn't then take them off individually, which was one of the entire reasons for doing it in the first place. So by making this larger, I should get around that problem. This bit here is just a little bit too tight. It does fit okay, but once it's anodized, it'll be a little bit bigger, and I can just make it 0.1 millimeters wider, and that will just add a lot more clearance for the little distro that runs here. Likewise, the main distros on this side, I just want a little bit more clearance. I left them maybe a bit tight, and if you don't push them in perfectly, it's a little bit tricky. And when it's in the chassis and you've got wires and everything, actually that becomes quite difficult. So having just a little bit more room, say 0.1 millimeters, will make it considerably easier to install everything. So I think that just makes sense to go and do that. So we'll pop this on the M8 and we'll just finish all this up. With these extra clearance areas, everything should now be a lot easier to install, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this is going to change things around when I get round to finally building up the whole thing. Speaking of which, there is one main component left that I need to handle, which is the RGB controller, because I'm not really happy with the system I've got currently, where it's basically just hidden underneath. The original RGB controller area was not remotely big enough, so I'm going to have to make a brand new one, and that's going to also include making a new power supply mounting panel. So that's actually quite a large bit. We're going to get that done next time, and then finally I can send all this stuff off to be anodized. We can get it back, assemble it all, do the cabling, and the rig will finally be complete. Now before I head off, I just want to give an absolutely huge thank you to everybody who has tuned in since bringing this channel back. It's been incredible. The fact that we hit 10,000 subscribers to me is mental. We've done it incredibly quickly, especially if you compare it to how long it took over on BitTech. So it's really wonderful. Thank you, everyone. And a special thank you has to go to my new patrons. So if you didn't see previously, I now have a Patreon. So if you do enjoy the content, please consider becoming a member over there. It's an amazing feeling knowing that there are people out there who really appreciate what I'm doing over here. And it does mean absolutely the world to me. So thank you very much. Of course, if you're new to the channel, make sure to hit subscribe because you don't want to miss any of the future content whatsoever. We're going to have more of the ASMR videos, we're going to have more project log type things. We've got some really cool things sitting next door that I want to finally get round to tackling, and you don't want to miss any of that. Of course, you can also find me over on Instagram, Facebook and TikTok, but if you want the absolute best behind the scenes action, that's going to be found on my Patreon, which is also linked below. So once again, thank you everybody, and I'll catch you next time.